Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Özge Ersoy. I'm the Public Programs Lead at Asia Art Archive, and today I'm with Anthony Jung, Asia Art Archive researcher specializing in Greater China. Together we'll do a walkthrough of our exhibition, Learning What Can't Be Taught, on display here at the Asia Art Archive Library in Hong Kong. This is an exhibition about art education in China, and here we're telling a story that goes back to the 1950s. The story is about 6 artists from 3 generations who were each other's teachers and students at the same art academy. So with the exhibition, we look at how these artists have learned in and outside of the classroom, and we ask, is artistic attitude something that can't be taught or passed down from one generation to another? In the exhibition, we have rarely seen artworks and archival materials by these 6 artists. Jin Yide and Zheng Shengtian, who studied in the late 1950s, Zhang Peili and Geng Jianyi, who studied in the early 80s, and Jiang Zhuyun and Yang, who studied in the mid-2000s. All these artists are alumni of the China Academy of Art in Hangzhou, formerly known as the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts, which is the first art academy in China, established in 1928. So now we are at the entrance of the library, and we open the exhibition with 3 images showing art classes at different points in time between the 1950s and 2000s. The first image that you see, the one on the right, is from 1968. It shows a group of teachers and students of the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts producing a large-scale Mao portrait. The photograph was taken in Hangzhou Steel Factory, and this was a time for socialist education, where art workers were trained to serve the new socialist state. The second image, the one in the middle, shows a drawing class from the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts in 1985. This is after university education resumed following the end of the Cultural Revolution, and a time when the principles of Soviet art were still dominant in art education. And yet some students and teachers were challenging these very principles, and Anthony will speak more about this in a minute. On the left, we have an image showing a class by Geng Jianyi from 2003. In this photograph, you see students sitting in front of a wall, contemplating, which shows a radical break away from the studio practice. This is a moment in time when experiments to teach conceptual art and new media art started in formal art academies in China. With these 3 images, we start asking, how did these 6 artists carve out space for experimentation in and outside the classroom, for themselves, and later for their students?
This section is about the 1980s, a period that represents changes and reforms in the history of contemporary China. The protagonists of this section are Zhang Peili and Geng Jianyi, who were students in Studio Number 1 of the oil painting department at the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts. Studio Number 1 was one of the 3 studios in the oil painting department at the Zhejiang Academy during the 1980s. And it was known for being the least conservative and giving its students bigger freedom. Its leading teachers were Jin Yide and Xu Junxuan, who have both attended the training class with Romanian artist Eugen Popper in 1960 to 1962. Zhang Peili and Geng Jianyi are generally considered to be important figures in contemporary Chinese art. Now, they would be known for their practices in various media, like video installation and conceptual photography. But in the 1980s, they studied it in the painting department and began their artistic career with painting. Here on display, we have 3 works, 1 by Zhang Peili and 2 by Geng Jianyi. All these works are from their student period. We can see in this work how Zhang and Geng interpreted the education that they received and transformed them into their own artistic personalities. This oil painting by Zhang Peili was made when he was a Year 3 student in 1983. It's unknown from the collection of the Academy, and as far as we know, it's the first time this painting is being exhibited outside of the academy. The subject matter of this painting is the workers. The workers is, of course, one of the most important and quote-unquote politically correct subject matters in the paradigm of socialist art. However, unlike in the typical socialist realist painting, the workers in this painting are represented in an ambiguous manner. They show low trace of emotion, action, and personality. In the interview we did with Zhang Peili, he explains that he was influenced by existentialist literature, such as Kafka and Camus, and wanted to represent a sensibility that may be considered to be an antithesis of the orthodox socialist art. It is a sense of detachment, objectivity, and indifference. This sensibility continues to be a critical element throughout the future works of Zhang Peili.
In the next section, we'll be looking at what happened after Zhang Peili and Geng Jianyi graduated from the Art Academy. In the interview that Anthony made for this exhibition, Zhang Peili says, "When I first graduated from the Art Academy, I had a very liberating feeling. There was about a year when I was making paintings at home, painting things that I have been holding back from for years." Zhang Peili and Geng Jianyi were among many artists in China who emerged from art academies in the mid-80s and wanted to develop an experimental practice, which was not fully possible at the Art Academy. They started creating collectives and organizing their own exhibitions across the country, and later this was acknowledged as the New Wave art movement. So after their graduation, Zhang Peili and Geng Jianyi co-founded the Pon Society with other artist friends. This was in Hangzhou. With this collective, they wanted to rethink the relationship between art and the environment in which we encounter art, when art becomes public. In this section, we have images of their work with the Pon Society, and for instance, in this photo, we see a public art intervention from '86, where they created paper cutouts that take the form of Tai Chi positions. This intervention was made on the street, on a wall opposite the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts, showing how art could directly engage with everyday life. The reason why we included these materials about the Pon Society here is that we want to ask whether it's possible to think about these collective experiments as a form of self-learning. How can we think about art education outside the classroom? Because after all, these attitudes these artists developed through this experience were foundational for how they taught their students in the early 2000s.
We continue with Zhang Peili and Geng Jianyi. On display here are two famous works by Zhang and Geng from the early 1990s. Now we can see a timeline of how these two artists have developed from their student time to their participation in the avant-garde movement and to moving towards mature personal styles. The two works here include an iconic work by Zhang Peili, a video work called Announcement Number 3, Hai Jin, from 1991, and a photographic collage by Geng Jianyi called 4 Steps of Get Off First Stand On, from 1990. This work by Geng looks like an instruction diagram about getting on and off a bus. It looks like a document to promote public conduct. We may be familiar with promotional documents like this, especially in Hong Kong and some other East Asian cities. Our societies do emphasize about good behavior, and it is a major component in our education. 4 Steps of Get Off First Stand On allows multiple interpretations. One of the possible interpretations is that it's responding to the fact that living in Chinese society and Chinese culture, a person is constantly being told about what is quote-unquote correct. There seems to be a certain surveillance and control over everything, even in the smallest things like getting on a bus or putting on a jacket. By the same token, Geng Jianyi has unexpectedly turned something so mundane, so uninteresting into a work of art. So it creates strange feelings, as if it's trying to remind us a certain aspect of our life that we are so used to and become unaware of the possible problematics in them.
And now we're moving to the early 2000s when Zhang Peili and Geng Jianyi went back to school to teach. In 2003, China Academy of Art introduced a new media art department. Zhang Peili was invited to lead this program, while Geng Jianyi became a core teacher there. The new media art department became a pioneer in rethinking how art could be taught. In this section, we have the original signboard of the department that we found in Zhang Peili's studio, and also the teaching schedules and the diagrams of the course structure to show how artist teachers were experimenting with the question of what art education should be. Here, I'll go back to the interview with Zhang Peili where he says, "The boundary between teaching and learning was cancelled." This was made possible as he invited influential artists from outside the academy to come and teach classes in the department. The image that we saw at the entrance, Geng Jianyi's class, is a great example of that. In this section, we also have artworks by Lu Yang and Jiang Zhuyun, who graduated from this department. If you listen to the interviews with Lu Yang, you'll see that she says she was an awful student, but she was encouraged by her teachers to experiment with her ideas. She also says she's not necessarily a good teacher now, but when she teaches, she's good at encouraging, in motivating the worst students in the class. With this in mind, we think we should keep asking ourselves what constitutes success in art education. Lu Yang's artwork in this exhibition also speaks to the conditions of learning. This work that you're looking at right now is titled BCMI Reverse Monitoring, the Ultimate Learning Terminal. It's a work from 2008-2009 when she was a graduate student at the department. And in the work, you see a diagram that shows a brain-computer interface that disciplines a human subject to learn. This is an interface that punishes the subject when their attention level is decreased. This work makes us think about the idea of high efficiency in learning. And we believe this resonates with Zhang Peili's and Geng Jianyi's interest in the human body, alienation, and social control, which we see in their works from the 1990s.
Another artwork on display in this section on the New Media Department is a performance entitled Sound of Temperature by Jiang Zhuyun. This work was done in 2005 at an event organized by the Sound Art class led by teacher Yao Daijun. Jiang Zhuyun was a Year 3 student then. In this work, Jiang was half naked in an environment where the temperature was close to 0 degrees Celsius. He used the microphone to record and amplify the sound that his body made in the coldness. An intriguing rhythm was created by the sounds of his body trembling, his teeth chattering, and his heartbeats becoming faster and faster. Sound of Temperature is an excellent work to look at in the context of new media art, as it involves at least 2 levels of mediation. The human body mediates the coldness of the nature into sound, and the equipment remediates the bodily sound into electronic sound. Jin Yide and Zheng Shengtian were both students at the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts in the 1950s. They are among a generation of Chinese artists who grew up under the dominating influence of the socialist art from the Soviet Union. Jin and Zhang are teachers of Zhang Peili, Geng Jianyi, and other important avant-garde artists from the Zhejiang Academy. They are highly respected by their students as they are considered to be great teachers who supported artistic freedom. This section concerns about an earlier moment in history, the 1960s. With this section, we hope to introduce the extraordinary experiences of Jin and Zhang as art students and artists. an attempt to develop a better understanding of how and why they became strong advocates of artistic freedom and individuality. Jin Yide, who was born in 1935, has told us about the two important teachers he met in the early 1960s. Eugene Popper, a Romanian artist who was invited to host a training class in Hangzhou between 1960 to 62, and Yide, who was a pioneer in Chinese modernism. Here, we have 4 original paintings from Jin Yide from 1962 and 63. At that time, Jin has just finished the Eugene Popper class and started to become the assistant to Professor Yide. These 4 paintings are outdoor landscape paintings. 2 were made in northeast China, and the other 2 were made in Zhejiang province, in eastern China. In them, we can see how Jin experimented with different modernist vocabularies. In the context of socialist art, landscape paintings that have low political message were not considered to be quote-unquote serious art, and when they served low propaganda purposes, they could easily be criticized as expressing the taste of the petty bourgeois. Today, however, we can see how interesting these paintings are, as they represent the process of an artist looking for a literal and truthful voice for himself. The other artist we look at in this section is Zheng Shengtian, who was born in 1938. The Zheng Shengtian archive in Asia Art Archive is one of the most popular archives in our research collection. Here on display is a selection of materials and books from the collection, as well as a new interview we conduct with Zhang. In this new interview, he told us the story of how he was shocked by the Mexican art exhibition in Shanghai in 1956, and how that exhibition, as well as his experience of studying at the Central Academy of Fine Art with Professor Dong Xiwen, have inspired him to look for artistic methods alternative to those from the Soviet Union. We conclude the exhibition with a photograph, which will also point us back to the beginning. This photograph is about 1977. And this year, the Cultural Revolution just ended, and the National University entrance exam was resumed after a suspension for over 10 years. It was such a big moment for a lot of young people in China, as many of them have waited for years for this chance to have university education. This photograph shows a teacher reviewing the applications to submit to the Zhejiang Academy of Fine Arts. Amongst thousands of applicants, only dozens of them were accepted. People who have managed to get into the art academies or any university were considered to be extremely prestigious, as they were the elites and the hopes of the country. In reality, many of these early university students have later become the driving forces of China's cultural and economic development. 1977 is not only a year to remember in art history, but it is also a critical year in the formation of contemporary China.